purpose of saying prayers before we start teachings or other practices like meditation is to set up a positive state of mind. But some of you may not be so familiar with the prayers and understand their meaning, so you might not be able to generate such a positive state of mind. So let's take a few minutes to work on that and really try to make sure our state of mind, our attitude, our motivation for being here and participating in this session tonight, and also in this retreat, which is starting tonight, is as positive as possible, as good as possible. So one of the prayers we just recited is the prayer of the four immeasurable thoughts. These are loving kindness, wishing all sentient beings to have happiness and its causes. Compassion, wishing all sentient beings to be free of suffering and its causes. Joy, wishing all sentient beings to have every kind of happiness from now on in their future lives up to liberation and enlightenment. And equanimity, wishing all sentient beings to be free of the disturbing attitudes that tend to plague us, attachment, clinging to loved ones, certain people we like, and aversion or hatred towards other people we don't like. So generally these attitudes are positive aspirations for others, for ourselves and others. So let's take a few minutes to just contemplate the words of this prayer and try to really generate these thoughts, these attitudes in our mind. I feel how wonderful it would be if ourselves and everyone else, all living beings without exception, could have happiness, peace of mind, only positive experiences, the fulfillment of our wishes and hopes. And then feel how wonderful it would be if all beings everywhere, without exception, could be free of all the different kinds of problems and suffering, both physical, like sickness, pain, and mental or emotional, like fear, depression, sadness, anxiety, irritation, and so on, all the things that afflict our minds and keep our minds from being peaceful and happy. So wouldn't it be wonderful if everybody could be free of every type of suffering and bad experience? And see if you can feel how wonderful it would be if everyone could have continuous happiness, genuine happiness from this time onwards, in the future, in future lives, all the way up to the attainment of the real peace and happiness of nirvana and enlightenment. And finally, how wonderful it would be if everyone, ourselves and others, could have a state of mind that is unbiased, that has equal concern, equal dedication to helping others without being biased and liking some, wanting to help some, but rejecting others. similar to a really good, caring doctor who's willing to help everyone, anyone who is sick or injured in need of help, not refusing to help anybody. So, how wonderful if we could all have that kind of attitude and see everyone as equally deserving of our concern, our kindness, our help. So, these thoughts and wishes might seem really big and difficult to accomplish, but they're not. If we start now and work on our own minds little by little, making our own minds more loving and compassionate and equanimous towards others, then gradually those attitudes will become natural in us and we'll be able to help others to do the same. And that's the real purpose of Buddha's teachings, is helping our minds to transform, to have less negative or deluded, mistaken states of mind that cause suffering and problems for ourselves and others, and to have more positive states of mind that bring genuine peace and happiness to ourselves and others. So, as we're listening tonight and for the coming week to these teachings on Buddha Dharma, Buddha's teachings, let's do it with that motivation, wanting to bring the greatest possible benefit to ourselves, to others, to the world, from this time on, all the way up to our attainment of full enlightenment, full awakening, Buddhahood. Okay, so I'm very pleased to be able to lead this retreat. This is a Sravasti Abbey annual event. It's been going on for many years, the summer retreat. And usually there's a lot of people here, 40, 50 guests to join this retreat. But this year, that's not possible because of circumstances in the world, a pandemic and so on. So we're doing this retreat online. So we have just the usual residents here doing the retreat together. And then, 50, 60 people are joining us online. So this year, every year, I think the retreat is focused on a particular deity. Last year it was Manjushri. And this year I was asked to lead the retreat because Venerable Children was supposed to be in India at this time teaching, and that had to be canceled. But anyway, I'm still leading the retreat. And I really feel a strong connection with the practice of Tara. And when I mentioned that, everybody else was quite enthusiastic as well. So Tara is quite a favored practice among the people here. So we're going to be doing the practice of Tara, and tonight I will give an introduction to this practice. Who is Tara? Some people joining the retreat may not have much understanding of that, and every day I'll also in the afternoons I'll continue giving more explanation about various aspects of the Tara practice. And then the practice of Tara will be done together starting tomorrow morning, the first session in the morning. The Abbey residents will lead that practice, so you can join with them. And then there'll be another session of Tara practice in the later morning, and then another one in the afternoon. And then I'll be giving 2 talks each day, one in the morning. And in the morning talks, I'm going to be talking about this text by Shantideva, Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, or also known as Engaging in the Bodhisattva's Deeds. And it's a huge text, so I'm only going to talk about one chapter, chapter 9, which is also huge. And so we won't be able to do the whole of it, but I'll choose certain parts of it that we'll talk about and meditate on. And chapter 9 is very, very difficult. It's about emptiness. It's the perfection of wisdom. So it's quite challenging, even for me, trying to understand it so that I can talk about it. But we'll work through it together, and I'm sure we'll come up with some good understanding, some beneficial ideas. And then in the afternoon talk, I'll continue giving more information about the Tara practice, the practice of Tara. So I prepared, there are 4 files that you should have for this retreat. So I hope everyone was able to download them or get them by email. So one is chapter 9, the verses of chapter 9. You won't need that until tomorrow morning. Another file is a commentary to chapter 9 by a Tibetan master of the past named Drakpa Gyaltsen. So that's the second file. And a third file is just a set of notes that I put together on my own, some supplementary information to help us with chapter 9. And the fourth file is notes about Tara. So we're going to use those tonight. So if you haven't already found them, then try to find them should be on the website to download. The heading is just Notes on Green Tara Practice. Before we get into that, though, I'd just like to talk a little bit about retreat. Some of you might be doing a retreat for the first time. And there's all different ways of doing a retreat. You can do a retreat in a group like what we're doing here. You can do it on your own or by yourself. Generally, it's good to do group retreats for a while before trying it on your own, just so you know how to do a retreat, how to arrange a schedule and keep the schedule and be disciplined and so on. So that's my own experience. I did a number of group retreats for the first couple of years and learned how to do it in a group with somebody guiding us. And then later I was able to do on my own. And then you can do a retreat for varying lengths of time, even one day or a weekend or a week or longer. In Tibet, there are people who go into retreat for years, sometimes their whole life. They just stay in retreat until their life ends. But you have to be quite knowledgeable and a skilled, experienced meditator to be able to do that and make it work. If not, you might just end up in the nut house. It's true. It's tricky. Meditation is tricky. Working with your mind is tricky. So you really have to know what you're doing. And then there's different kinds of retreats. You can do retreat focused on a particular deity, like we're doing here, Tara. Many, many different deities in the Tibetan tradition. Or you could do a retreat on the Lamrim, the stages of the path to enlightenment. And then there's other special practices, Dzogchen or Mahamudra, so you can choose one or more practices that you focus on during a retreat. And it's good to get teachings, especially if you're going to do retreat on your own, to make sure you have teachings beforehand so you know what to do, how to meditate, and so on. But in general, the purpose of a retreat, well, there's several purposes. One is to accumulate positive energy. So during a retreat, we are doing practices such as meditation, prayers, recitation of mantras, or maybe purification practices. And these are for the purpose of accumulating merit, positive energy, which we need for our mind to be able to develop correctly along the path and ultimately reach liberation and enlightenment, these higher goals that we're working for. That's the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is enlightenment or awakening. But of course, that's something that takes a long time, and you can't expect that in one retreat you're going to do that. But in a retreat, we accumulate the causes for enlightenment, which, among other things, are accumulating merit, good energy, positive energy, and also to be really careful about our behavior during a retreat. When we're not in retreat and we're just doing our normal activities, working, going here, going there, talking to people, and so on, because we're busy, it's harder to keep track of our mind, what's happening in our mind. And it's possible that afflictions like anger, attachment, jealousy, pride can come up in our mind and pollute our mind in a way, and then lead to unwise, unskillful behavior, creating bad karma, in other words. So in a retreat, we have a more special environment where we're not doing so many other things. Ideally, you keep silence in a retreat or speak as little as possible. So that cuts down on the possibility of unskillful speech. And then we try to stay in a situation where we're not just going here and there and doing all kinds of things. So that can cut down on negative actions of body that we might otherwise get involved in. So we try to really restrain ourselves, our body, our speech, and our mind from engaging in activities that are unwise, unskillful, creating negative karma, creating problems for others, and so forth. So that's one part of retreat, is refraining from unwise or negative actions and trying to create positive, virtuous actions as much as we can. And that's all to do with ethics. So ethical conduct, trying to keep really good ethical conduct during a retreat. And then working on our mind. During a retreat, you have a greater opportunity to observe your mind, what's happening in your mind, and notice, what is happening in your mind, and be able to recognize unwise, unskillful attitudes that maybe you don't always notice, so that then you can see what you need to work on. And the practices that you're doing will give you advice, clues, methods on how to work on those attitudes in your mind. And just generally deepen our understanding of the Buddha's teachings and the path that we are trying to follow, leading eventually to liberation, to enlightenment. So those are the purposes of retreat. That's why it's recommended, to keep silence, and also try to disengage yourself from things like in media, watching TV, listening to the radio, or going online, reading news, and so on, because that kind of information will just create more disturbance in your mind, more distractions when you try to meditate. So it's good to, just take a break from those things for the next week. And also try not to communicate with people by phone or even by internet, by messaging and so on. That may sound kind of harsh. There may be some really, communications that you have to do. Like if you have children, young children, you have to communicate with them. Or you could ask a friend if there is something that you need to know, some urgent news you need to be aware of, that they inform you of that. For example, if there's a forest fire in your area and you might have to evacuate, you could ask a friend, please let me know about that kind of thing. But the other news, the everyday news, that's, there's always something going on, lots of things going on. We don't need to know every single thing that's happening every day. So it's good to, take a break from that, disengage from that. And then just whatever free time you have during a retreat to further your knowledge of the teachings, to study, to read, go for walks. That's also very nice. Go for walks in nature. Do some yoga or exercise to keep your body healthy. But mainly just really try to keep your mind in the atmosphere of a retreat. Okay, so the practice of Tara. So you'll be doing this tomorrow morning with the Abbey residents. And there's different practices of Tara, different ways of practicing Tara, but there's a particular one that's used here in a so-called Red Prayer Book, Pearl of Wisdom, Volume 2, a meditation on Arya Tara. So there's a number of prayers in this, and I won't be able to explain all of them tonight. But as we go on, each day I'll add a little bit more. Tonight, I just wanted to kind of introduce you to Tara. And so if you have this handout, this set of notes that I put together, some of this preliminary information is there. So it starts with, who is Tara? So in Tibetan Buddhism, there are many, a big part of Tibetan Buddhism is a tradition known as Vajrayana or Tantric Buddhism. And within Vajrayana Buddhism, there are many, many different, we call them deities. They're actually enlightened beings, different emanations of enlightened mind, awakened mind, Buddha mind. And so Tara is one of these. And there are many others that you might be familiar with, such as Chenrezig, Avalokiteshvara, is said to be the Buddha of compassion, probably the most popular deity in Tibet. And then Manjushri. Manjushri is said to be the Buddha of wisdom, representing wisdom. And there's many others as well. And I think when we first encounter Tibetan Buddhism, we tend to wonder, why are there so many of these deities? And we might even think of other religious traditions. For example, the Roman religion, the Greek, they had many gods. So people might think, are they like the Greek gods or the Roman gods or the Celtic gods? They're not like that. Rather, all the different deities in Vajrayana Buddhism are said to be emanations of or manifestations of enlightened mind. So we all and every living being have the potential, the ability to transform our mind. Right now, our mind is not enlightened. It's just an ordinary, unenlightened mind with lots of confusion and delusions and problems. But the disturbing emotions, anger, greed, hatred, ignorance, jealousy, and so on, those are not a permanent part of our mind. They are transitory, they are adventitious, they can be removed, we can be free of them. So it's possible to completely purify the mind, completely free the mind from all these disturbing thoughts and emotions and mistaken aspects of the mind, and bring the mind to the state of enlightenment, Buddhahood. This is what the Buddha himself did, Shakyamuni Buddha. He was once an ordinary person like ourselves, but he found a way to purify his mind and bring his mind to the state of enlightenment. And many others have done that as well. So there isn't just one Buddha, but there are actually many Buddhas, many beings who have reached enlightenment. And when a person has reached enlightenment, their mind has become enlightened, it has the ability to appear in any form at all, and many at the same time. This is one of the chief ways in which a Buddha helps other beings, is by appearing in different forms to teach them and guide them and help them emerge from suffering, help them reach enlightenment as well. And so since beings, like human beings and other kinds of beings, are different, each one of us is unique. We have our own propensities, our likes, our dislikes, what works for us, what doesn't work for us, and so on. Because each one of us is unique. Then the Buddha will know what kind of form or what kind of appearance will be most helpful for us. And so that's how it comes about, that there are these different manifestations of Buddhists. And so for us, those of us who are human beings, it's very helpful to have appearances that look like us, right? That don't look like chairs or gophers or, flies, but, human-like appearances with a face and hands and legs and eyes and so on. So a Buddha can manifest in those forms that we can see, we can relate to, and they help us be inspired to practice, and they serve as a kind of example, a role model, to show us what we can do, how we can become. So that's how it comes about that there are these different appearances or different manifestations or different deities. So one of these is Tara. But we can also understand Tara in different ways. There's different ways that she is talked about. So one of those is that she was once a person and she developed the aspiration to become a Buddha, to become fully enlightened. And in that way, she became a bodhisattva. And then she worked for a very long time to, accumulate merit and help sentient beings, and eventually became a Buddha herself. So in the notes here is one of the stories. There's a couple of stories. So one of the stories about the origin of Tara is here. And so I'll read it because I think it's quite nice. In the past, many eons ago, during the time of Buddha Dundumbisvara, so this is, I don't know, this is in probably some other world. In Buddhism, we tend to think in the West that this is the only world there is, And even though the universe is vast, some people have an open mind and they think there's probably other planets where there are people and beings and so on, but we haven't yet contacted them. But in Buddhism, it said there are many worlds, many universes, and many places where there's intelligent life, intelligent beings. So this isn't the only one. This is talking about another world and another time, in another universe. Okay, so in the universe called Manifold Light, there lived a princess by the name of Moon of Wisdom Knowledge, Yeshidawa in Tibetan. She was a very devoted disciple and would daily set out many offerings to the Buddha and his Sangha, his followers. Eventually, she generated bodhicitta, the aspiration to attain enlightenment and become a Buddha herself in order to help all living beings. So she became a bodhisattva. She generated this very pure mind of wanting to reach enlightenment, become a Buddha herself to help others. Some bhikshus or monks came to know of this and urged her to dedicate the merits she had created to be reborn as a male. So this is an idea we find in traditional Buddhist teachings that having a male body, a male form, male life is preferable to that of a female. There's a lot of discussion about that. I asked one of my teachers once why this is so, and he said, well, in the past it was really difficult to be a female, especially like at the time of the Buddha. Women didn't have freedom. They didn't have the chance to make their own decisions. They were under the control of their father until they got married, and they didn't have any choice about who they married. That was decided for them. And then once they got married, they were under the control of their husband. And then if the husband died, then they would be under the control of their son. So they were never free to do what they wanted. And, they weren't always treated very well. They probably didn't have any choice about having babies or not. And there's a lot of suffering and being pregnant, giving birth to children, and so on. So it was seen as an unfortunate life. Now, things are different today. We have more choices. Women are not so under the control of others, and we have choices about whether we have babies or not. So, but at the time in the past, like at the time of the Buddha, it was a harder life. But the Buddha himself, when he was asked, women can attain nirvana just as men can, and he said yes. And many of his female disciples did attain nirvana. So women and men have the same potential to transform their mind and free their mind from suffering and delusions, the causes of suffering. So anyway, so this is where these monks were coming from. Why don't you pray to be born a male? However, the princess rejected this advice, saying, she's really smart. Here there is no man, there is no woman, no self, no person, and no consciousness. Labeling male or female has no essence, but deceives the evil-minded world. So this is talking about emptiness. And we're going to get into that when we go through Shantideva's 9th chapter. And in fact, there is a verse in the 9th chapter that's saying this as well. Once you examine the body and you find no body and no person, no self, then you can see there's no male, no female. So she had a lot of wisdom in saying this. There's no inherently existing male or female, man or woman. This is just part of our ignorance, thinking things to exist inherently. And then she went on to make the following vow. There are many who desire enlightenment in a man's body, but none who work for the benefit of sentient beings in the body of a woman. Therefore, until samsara is empty, I shall work for the benefit of sentient beings in a woman's body. From that time onwards, the princess dedicated herself to winning full and complete enlightenment. When she accomplished that goal, she became known as Tara, the liberator. So, that's just a brief story of how Tara came about. How she went from being a princess to a bodhisattva and then to a Buddha. And it's really beautiful, really inspiring, this promise that she made, this vow that she made to always be in the form of a woman, because it's true. I mean, most of the Buddhas, and if you look at a picture of the merit field, when we do the merit field, most of the figures are males. It's very difficult to find any female figure. So that can be discouraging for those of us who are female. It's hard to find role models. So Tara understood that and promised that she would always remain in the form of a woman to inspire us. So she's very much loved by women, female practitioners, but also a lot of male practitioners, including Lama Atisha. He was one of the great Indian masters who came to Tibet in the early days. Great scholar and practitioner and teacher. And Tara was one of his main deities. And it was said he even had direct communication with her. He could talk to Tara and have a conversation with her. She would answer. So, yeah. So that's one story. And then another story says that Chenrezig, who's Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of compassion, had been working for a long time to help sentient beings. He had been able to help hundreds of thousands of beings become free from samsara, cyclic existence. But then he checked and realized there were still so many more beings suffering in samsara. He began to cry. And from the pool formed by his tears, a lotus arose. And from the lotus opened up and Tara appeared, saying, "Don't worry, I will help you." So Tara is associated with Chenrezig and also with Amitabha Buddha. There's actually a little image of Amitabha Buddha on her crown. So there's different ways we can think of Tara and relate to Tara. We can think of her in these stories. She was an ordinary person and then generated bodhicitta, the aspiration to become enlightened, became a bodhisattva, and then worked on her practice until she eventually became a Buddha. Now she's a Buddha, fully enlightened Buddha, continuing to appear in the body of a woman. And then there's this other story where she's connected with Chenrezig. So So these are, different ways we can relate to Tara. And in Tantra, in Vajrayana, um, to actually practice Tantra fully, one needs to receive empowerment and then instructions in the practice and so on and so forth. Actually, the practice of Tara, like the one we're doing here, mainly does come from the Vajrayana tradition. But it's said that even people who haven't received empowerment or initiation can do this kind of practice as long as you're visualizing Tara outside of yourself. Like here, we're visualizing Tara in front of us or above our heads. But in the full practice of Vajrayana, you do a sadhana in which you meditate on emptiness. You need to have some understanding of emptiness of the eye, emptiness of your body, your mind, and so on. So you meditate on emptiness, bring about an understanding of emptiness, dissolve everything into emptiness, and then your mind understanding emptiness arises in the form of Tara. And you identify with that. So you're identifying with yourself as Tara. And that's said to be a very, very powerful practice to hasten your own attainment of enlightenment. But to be able to do that, the practice in that way, you need empowerment first. So the way we're going to be doing the practice here in the group, since perhaps not everyone has received the empowerment, will just be to visualize Tara in front of us. But anyway, in the practice of Tantra, with the practice of Tara, using Tara as a deity, it's possible to actually reach enlightenment through that means. And Tara is also someone we can rely on for help when we need help. So to understand that better, let's continue in the notes. Some more information about Tara. The next section, the purpose and benefits of practicing Tara. So this comes from it used to be a little booklet, but it seems to be out of print now, but you can download it from the internet. At the end of this set of notes, there's a link where you can download this little booklet called Tara the Liberator by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So in that, he explains there are many inner obstacles to our mental development, and these inner obstacles can create external obstacles. To obtain success in our Dharma practice, to actualize the path to enlightenment, we need to rely on a special deity or Buddha, for example, Tara. All the actions of the Buddha manifest in the female form Tara to help sentient beings successfully accomplish both temporal and ultimate happiness. So Tara is said to be the like many of the tantric deities have a particular function. Like Chenrezig is said to be the Buddha of compassion. So practicing Chenrezig helps us to develop our compassion. And Manjushri, the Buddha of wisdom. So meditating on Manjushri helps to increase our wisdom. So Tara is said to be the manifestation of the enlightened activities of the Buddhas, the action. Skillful means, it's also translated as the activity of the Buddhas in many different ways to help sentient beings. And so by relying on Tara, we can receive help for many different purposes. So it continues saying, practicing Tara can bring the following benefits: accumulating a great deal of merit. So merit is positive energy, positive potential, that I like to think of it as fuel. Like if you have a car and the car can take you places, but only if you have fuel. So if the fuel tank is empty, you don't have any fuel, the car will just sit there and won't be able to go anywhere. So the fuel enables the car to move. So I like to think of it, I mean, this is just my own analogy, but it helps me to think of positive energy as like fuel that enables our mind to move, to progress along the path to enlightenment. So we accumulate merit by doing different kinds of practices, such as making offerings, practicing generosity, giving to others who need help, but also by meditating on, different kinds of practices such as Tara, loving kindness, compassion, reciting mantras. So any kind of positive, virtuous, wholesome activity we do is a way of accumulating merit. And then next, he said it helps us avoid a suffering rebirth in the next life. Well, not everybody is able to accept that we have another life, but the Buddha definitely did teach that. And so it's good to be concerned about that and make sure we don't attain an unfortunate rebirth, but attain a good rebirth in our next life. So relying on Tara, or relying on any of the Buddhas, in fact, is a way to do that. And then quick attainment of enlightenment. So by relying on and practicing Tara, we're creating more and more causes for enlightenment. And next it says, removing obstacles and fulfilling our wishes. So that's what Rinpoche was mentioning before. Obstacles, it's kind of I don't know, I've never really heard a clear explanation of what obstacles are, but they are the result of our own karma. So if we created, which we did, we've all created bad karma in this life and in our past lives. So our karma, our negative karma, can appear in the form of obstacles to things that we're trying to achieve, which can include our own Dharma practice, our study, as well as just in a worldly sense, being able to get the things we need and so forth, or accomplish the things we're trying to do. So when we face obstacles, it's said that relying on Tara, doing the practice of Tara, can remove these obstacles. And one of my teachers told me that in the monasteries, when they're studying, they study for, 10, 15, 20 years, very difficult program of studies. They do Tara practice every day to clear away obstacles, because you can face obstacles in your studies. You can get sick, or your mind can get a little funny, or your parents demand that you come home and work for them or whatever. So, to make sure that they will be able to continue in their studies and complete their studies and graduate, they rely on Tara. And then fulfilling our wishes. Yeah, so of course, the highest wishes, enlightenment and wisdom and other positive states of mind, but even ordinary things. It's, Tara is said to help us with even things like good health. If we're sick or having physical problems, we can pray to Tara to have to recover from those and have good health. Success in business or job hunting. Having a child. When I was living in Singapore during the 90s and teaching at Amitabha Buddhist Center, we would do Tara practice every Sunday afternoon. Yeah, we'd do the 4 mandala offering, and it was very popular. The meditation hall was packed with people. Many of them were there because their mother was sick, or business running into problems. So a lot of it was about just their lives. But if things aren't going well in our life, then that can become a problem, an obstacle to practice Dharma. Like, you really want to practice, but if your everyday reality is not working well, then your mind can be upset about that and worried about that. And so we do want things to run smoothly in our lives to be able to practice well. And this thing about having a child, that's mentioned in one of the prayers. Those wishing a child will have one. And there was one woman I met in Singapore who told me that she and her husband wanted so much to have a child. And they tried everything, every possible way for 10 years. And nothing worked. They weren't able to have a child. And then a friend of hers told her about Tara, this practice of Tara, and said, "Oh, it's said that if you pray to Tara, you can have a child." So I guess she thought, "Oh well, nothing to lose." So she started praying to Tara, and within a couple of months, she was pregnant. and gave birth to this beautiful little girl. She was so happy. So you might think, well, this is so mundane. What's that got to do with spiritual development, spiritual practice? Well, I mean, for some people, things like that are really important. And it's a good thing. I mean, having a child means you can practice love, kindness, compassion, generosity, teach your child, good ethics, help them grow up in a positive way. So for her, it was very important and very satisfying when she did finally have a child. So there's lots of stories. I'll tell them as we go along. Lots of stories of praying to Tara for different things and then having your prayers answered. So it gives you a lot of confidence. Yeah. So anyway, we can rely on her both for spiritual matters, help us in our practice, our study, and so on, but also in our ordinary everyday things. Then protection from fear and dangers. So this is another reason for relying on Tara. And I won't go into this tonight. We'll do it later in the week. But there's a list of 8 fears which have an external aspect and an internal aspect. The external things are things like floods, fire, and so forth. And there's all these stories about people, in these dangerous situations and praying to Tara and then, getting rescued from this dangerous situation. So those are the external fears. But the internal fears are our own attitudes that are dangerous, that are problematic, that create suffering for ourselves. Things like attachment, anger, and so forth. So we'll go through that later, not tonight. But let's look at the next section, because the next section describes the appearance of Tara. So this is important because in the practice you'll start doing tomorrow, you will be visualizing Tara. So the practice starts with prayers of refuge and bodhicitta, taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and generating the bodhicitta motivation to reach enlightenment, to help all living beings. Following that, the 4 measurable prayers, like we did earlier, generating these 4 measurable thoughts: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And then the actual practice involves visualizing Tara. And in the book, it says, in the space above. But I think what it means is in the space in front, when, like in front of us. But maybe above means like not at eye level, but a little bit above. They say kind of at the level of your forehead. That's where you usually visualize Buddhas. So that's where we will do the visualization of Tara. And so here in the notes is an explanation of the appearance of Tara and the symbolism of the different aspects of the appearance. So this is from a book called Images of Enlightenment. I don't know if we have it in the library here, but it's really nice. It has little sections on different deities and explains their imagery and the symbolism. So green Tara, and we say green Tara because there's actually different forms of Tara, which we'll also learn about later when we go through the 21 Taras. So there are Taras of different colors: red, white, gold, black. But here we're meditating on green Tara. So when we visualize her seated on a lotus, and it's arising out of the waters of a lake, just as Tara is said to have arisen from the compassionate tears of Avalokiteshvara. Her right hand is in the mudra of supreme generosity. So it's like the palm is open and facing outwards, and the fingers kind of pointing downwards. In the file, on the next page of the file, is actually a picture. If you haven't already seen it, there's a very nice painting of Tara. So this mudra indicates her ability to provide beings with whatever they desire. So it's called the giving mudra, and it can refer to giving. Well, I don't think we should take this literally. It's not like, money's going to pour out of her hand into our lap. Don't expect that. I think this is a common question that people have, like when we pray to, for example, Tara to help with business or to help with having a child or to help with spiritual development. How does it work? It's not so clearly explained, but my understanding, and I think this is also Venerable Children's understanding, is it isn't that this deity like Tara is just going to give us these things. It's just going to dump these things on us. But rather, we ourselves need to have accumulated the merit, the good karma, the positive potential to be able to have these things that we wish for. And the praying to the deity, praying to Tara, is like ripening. It enables the seeds that we have to ripen. Because there's lots of stories about people praying for things and not getting what they pray for, maybe even getting more obstacles or more problems. So then it wouldn't be right to blame the deity. You didn't do what I asked you to do. You don't work. This doesn't work. But rather, it's a two-way thing. We need to have, from our side, the necessary, good motivation, of course. We need to have the right attitude, the right intention, the right motivation, a pure motivation, not a corrupt one or a self-centered one, but a pure motivation. And also the karma, the good karma, the merit to be able to have or receive or obtain what it is we wish for. But then the praying to Tara, like reciting Tara's mantra or doing the 21 praises or whatever, this is like additional merit, additional good karma that acts like rain onto the seeds of our good karma to ripen them so that they can ripen and bring their results. But I think this gesture indicates that she's ready to, she's willing to, she wants to help us, she wants to give us whatever it is we need, whether it's material things or spiritual things. That's the real purpose of Tara, is to help us develop ourselves spiritually. And then her left hand is in front of her heart, and this mudra is called that of bestowing refuge. So the thumb and the ring finger touch, making a circle, and the other three fingers are going up, straight up. So the two fingers touching symbolizes the union of method and wisdom. Method and wisdom are said to be the two most important aspects of our practice, of our development. Method refers to compassion, love, generosity, working to help others, and so on. And then wisdom refers to understanding the true nature of things, the reality of things. So it said we need both of those, just as a bird needs two wings to fly. We need these two wings of method and wisdom to progress along the path. And they need to be practiced in a united way, in a combined way. And then the three fingers that point up symbolize the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, are objects of refuge. So we could say that this gesture means that by taking refuge in, relying on the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and making sure that we cultivate these two aspects of method and wisdom, we will be successful in our practice and reach enlightenment. And then here it says, in each hand, she holds the stem of a blue upala flower. But I noticed in the picture that I put in the file there, she does hold such a flower in her left hand, but not in her right hand. And it seems there are different versions. Some depictions of Tara, she's holding a flower in both hands, but some not. So you can choose if you want to visualize the flower there or not. But then these flowers, it's like she actually holds the stem of the flower between her fingers, and then the flower kind of goes and blooms in space next to her ears. And it said that there are three parts to the flower, three different blooms or blossoms to the flower. One is fully opened, another is just starting to open, and another is still a bud. It's like we see with the flowers here in the garden, like the lilies. There's one that's completely open and others that are just starting to open. And so these symbolize the Buddhas of the past, the present, and the future. This is a common expression you find in the teachings. Buddhas of the past, those who attained enlightenment already long ago. Buddhas of the present, those who are attaining enlightenment now and active in the world now. Buddhas of the future, who will attain enlightenment later on. And it's said that Tara is the mother of the Buddhas. This is an epithet of Tara. And just when we finish this section down below, there's an explanation of what this means from Lama Yeshe. So just wait a little bit and we'll find out what that means, why she called the mother of the Buddhas. Tara is dressed in the silken robes of royalty, like I think the royalty of India in the past. I don't know about the present, but they would wear these very beautiful silken, shimmering, flowing kind of clothing and beautiful colors, and also jewelry. She has rainbow colored stockings. I don't know why, but they're pretty, quite attractive. And then this little white kind of short blouse on top, and then another sort of sarong around her waist. And then all these jeweled ornaments like a crown and earrings and necklaces and armbands and so on. That used to bother me because I thought, what's this got to do with renunciation? We're supposed to renounce these kind of worldly things, beautiful clothes and jewelry and so on. And, here's this deity. She's a Buddha and she's wearing all this stuff. And also, like in our world, in order to extract gold and jewels from the earth, there's a lot of nasty things going on. The people who work in the mines to, extract these materials are usually not treated very well. It's a horrible job. They're not paid well. They have horrible living conditions. Sometimes they die. I think there was just the other day a collapse of a mine in Myanmar. Rubies. They have ruby mines there. Yeah. I don't know how many people were killed. Huh? 100 people. Yeah. So the people who own the mines are making tons of money and not paying the workers very well. So there's a lot of like corruption and what's the word for that? When I forget the word, but when people are, exploited. Yeah, exploited. People are exploited in order to produce these materials. So I kind of thought, well, if you were, socially aware, you would not use those things. You would reject those things. But then I thought about it, and this is also what it says in the teachings, that a deity like Tara or Chenrezig, who has these silks and jewels, and silks, that's another thing too, because I don't know how many thousands maybe of silkworms have to be killed or boiled alive in order to extract the silk from their, That's right, yeah. But ordinary silk in this world involves a lot of killing. So, but yeah, a deity like Tara, the silks that she's wearing and the jewels that she's wearing are not like that. They don't require this kind of suffering of other beings in order to be produced. But again, Tara and all her details, the details of her appearance, are manifestations of enlightened mind. So just enlightened mind appearing in these forms, appearing as silks and jewels and so forth. And they are said to be the result of her practice of the perfections of giving and ethics and patience and so on. So when you've fully developed the 6 perfections in your mind, then the result is being able to have these kind of appearances that represent those perfections. So when I thought of it in that way, understood it in that way, then it didn't bother me so much anymore. Has anyone else ever had that doubt? Yeah. I mean, with Shakyamuni Buddha, it's kind of it's different because he's like us. He's just wearing simple robes, no jewels, no silks. Yeah. So it says right here, the jeweled ornaments and so on. These symbolize her mastery of the perfections of generosity, morality, and so forth. And then she has a tiara on her head, fastened in her black hair. It's adorned with jewels. And the central one is a red ruby, symbolic of Amitabha, her spiritual father and the head of her Buddha family. So I think in the picture that you have there, you can actually see the little Amitabha if you blow it up. And so sometimes it's just a jewel, a red jewel that represents Amitabha, but sometimes the actual figure of Amitabha is there. So Amitabha is one of the 5 Buddha families, the head of one of the 5 Buddha families. So she's connected with Amitabha. Her spiritual father means like her teacher, her spiritual teacher. And then her sitting position, she has kind of a unique posture. Her left leg is drawn in to symbolize her renunciation of worldly passion. Her right leg extended to show that she's always ready to rise and come to the aid of those who need her help. Most Buddhas are sitting with their legs in the full Vajra posture. But then if they have to get up, it's hard to get up quickly. Although if you're a Buddha, that wouldn't be a problem. But for us, you have to, it takes a while. But sitting like her, she can just get up and go right away if somebody needs her help. So that's said to be the reason for her sitting in that way. And then her face, her facial expression, she has a warm, compassionate gaze looking down upon each sentient being as a mother regards her only child. I'm often dissatisfied with the way that deities are painted. I like to imagine them having a really beautiful, sweet, loving, gentle smile. So you can do that on your own, even if the picture, the statue or picture doesn't look like that. You can make your visualization look like that. And then her color, emerald green color, is related to the wind element. So our body, and in fact everything, all physical matter in the universe is said to be made of these 4 elements: earth, water, fire, and wind. And each one is associated with a different color. So green is the color associated with the wind element, and the wind element is connected with movement. So having the green color signifies her ability to act swiftly and without delay to bring benefits to sentient beings. I also had trouble with the green color initially, it kind of like brings up other associations like the Jolly Green Giant. Do you remember that? Some kind of peas, the Jolly Green Giant, or Martians, some idea that Martians were green. I mean, we just, if you're Tibetan and you're brought up in a culture where you have these images from the beginning of your life, then you probably don't have these kind of problems. But for us, coming to it later in life, it's a little challenging. But then I love nature. I love green grass and green trees. And I find looking at greenery in nature just has such an effect, such a positive effect on our mind. So when I think of Tara in that way, she's like Mother Nature. She's like this beautiful green in nature. So that was helpful for me to be happy with her green color. It is a beautiful green, beautiful color. Okay, so then let's look at why she's called the mother of all Buddhas. This is from Lama Yeshe. This is because she is the wisdom of reality, and all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are born from this wisdom. Yeah, so in one sense, Tara is associated with compassion. The compassion. I read it. There's another book. This is Venerable's book, How to Free Your Mind. Venerable Children wrote this book about Tara. And there's another book called, I forget what it's called. Tara, In Praise of Tara. The first story that we read is from that. In Praise of Tara, Songs to the Savioress by Martin Wilson. It's a big, thick book like this. And it's kind of scholarly in a way because he went into the sutras and the Tangyur and found all these, like the original texts about Tara from the 6th century, the Tantras and Sutras. And then over the centuries, different Indian masters and Tibetan masters writing poems and songs about Tara. So he researched these and translated them. So what was I talking about? I forgot what I was going there. Oh yeah, so he mentioned that the earliest images of Tara, historically, she was actually a side figure of Chenrezig. The main figure was Chenrezig. There'd be, as the central figure. And then next to and below would be these two female figures. One is Tara, one is another deity called Brikuti. And Tara symbolized Chenrezig's compassion, and Brikuti symbolized his wisdom. But then later, Tara sort of took prominence, and she was starting to appear as the central figure. But that was the original thing, that she was a representation of Chenrezig's compassion. And that's related to that story where she arose from the lotus that came from his tears. So there is that association of Tara being compassion, but there's also the association of her being wisdom. This epithet of being the mother of all Buddhas. There, it's referring to her as wisdom. It's the embodiment of the wisdom, the true nature of all things. And all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are born from that wisdom, because it's when we develop the wisdom, understanding reality, the true nature of all things, that we can become Buddhas and progress along the Bodhisattva path. That's what enables the mind to be free of all the obscurations and actually reach enlightenment. So, this wisdom is also the fundamental cause of happiness. Our own spiritual growth comes from this wisdom. So that is why Tara is called the mother. And Mother Tara has much wisdom to manifest many aspects, sometimes peaceful, sometimes wrathful, in different colors, all to help sentient beings. So we'll stop there for tonight. And that's just giving a little bit of introduction to Tara. So when you do the practice tomorrow and you're visualizing Tara in front of you, try to remember some of these, the significance of the different aspects. And with regard to visualization, this is also a practice that we from the West, Westerners, are not familiar with. And it's common to have difficulty visualizing. But I think it's a question of practice. If you just keep working at it, slowly, it gets better. And what I usually tell people, this is based on my own experience, don't worry about trying to get it right, trying to get it perfect, trying to have this perfect, clear visualization of all the details right from the beginning. And if you can't do it, then you get very frustrated and think you're a hopeless failure, or this practice isn't for you, or whatever. So don't do like that. I tell people, just do as much as you can, do as good as you can, even if it's just a blur, a green blur, a green blob. Yeah. Just something there in front of you that's green and it's Tara. Be happy with that. And just the important thing is to feel she is there, Tara is there. The wisdom of all the Buddhas, the compassion of all the Buddhas, the mother of all the Buddhas, this wonderful enlightened being who has so much love and compassion for me and everybody else in the universe and is just waiting, ready and waiting to help us in whatever way we need. She's there in front of me, even if you can't see her clearly. And then slowly, as you practice more, and also I think as we clear our minds become more clear and pure, then the ability to visualize improves, increases. And then there's quite a few prayers in the practice. As we go through the week, I'll do my best to explain the meaning of all the prayers, but yeah, it'll take some time too. And then there's also the mantra of Tara, Om Tari Tuturi Turi Soha, which is very beautiful. So we'll spend some time reciting the mantra. And while reciting mantras, we imagine light flowing from Tara into us and purifying us and blessing us, bringing us whatever we need to help and so on. Okay. Any questions?
A few questions from online. Someone asks, is there a reason for Tara having her head tilted to the right?
I don't know. I haven't heard that one. There might be, but I don't know what it is.
Someone else asks, what separates, or what is the difference between visualizing Tara in front of us and visualizing ourselves as Tara, aside from having received an empowerment? What's the difference?
Well, even when you do visualize yourself as Tara in those practices, they're called sadhanas. You don't just do that right from the beginning. Initially, you start with visualizing the Buddha and or Tara in front of you and do various practices, take refuge, and so on and so forth. And it's only at a certain point that Tara will come and dissolve into light and into you. And you imagine your mind merging with Tara's mind and having the same realizations that Tara has. And you do, ideally, need to have some understanding of emptiness at that point. And so you meditate on emptiness, you imagine your own body, mind, everything dissolving into emptiness. So you let go of your ordinary grasping, ordinary identification with this body and mind. And then that mind understanding emptiness and also motivated by bodhicitta is what appears as Tara. So this is a practice in Tantra. It's only found in Tantra, visualizing yourself as a deity. And it's said to be a very fast way of bringing about your attainment of enlightenment. Because it's like they call it taking the result into the path. We're imagining one day I'm going to be a Buddha and I'm going to be like this. I'm going to think like that. I'm going to feel like that. I'm going to do this and that and so on. So you're kind of imagining you're already a Buddha and doing the things that a Buddha would do and having the state of mind that a Buddha would have. So it's very powerful. It's said to bring about the attainment of enlightenment much more quickly than otherwise. Whereas if you're just visualizing the deity outside of yourself and praying, asking for help, meditating on her qualities, imagining blessings come. I mean, it's certainly very good, but it doesn't have that other element of, identifying yourself in that way. But yeah, you're not supposed to visualize yourself as a deity unless you've received the empowerment, and that needs to be received from a qualified teacher, qualified lama, in a ceremony. And nowadays His Holiness is in the past it had to be live. You had to be there in the presence of the teacher while the initiation is being given. But His Holiness has said now when he's giving initiations, if people watch, they still have to be, I think it has to be live rather than afterwards. So if you're there, you're fully attentive and feel that you are participating in the initiation and receiving it, then you can. So that makes it a little easier for people to receive initiation. But even before receiving initiation, ideally we should have very good understanding of the stages of the path, the lamrim, especially renunciation, bodhicitta, the wisdom, understanding, emptiness. So ideally, you spend some time learning about and meditating on the basic teachings of Buddhism and the path before taking initiations. Because without the foundations, the basis, then just taking initiation and doing tonic practice will not bring about the desired result. So I don't know if that answered the question or not. But
And another question around what is at the base of the lotus of Tara? Is it offerings?
At the base, yeah. I don't have it in front of me, but yeah, whenever they paint tankas of deities, they're supposed to have these offerings. I remember one place where I was, a Western tanka painter had painted a tanka of a deity, and he left out the offerings. And one lama saw that, and he said, "Oh, that's really wrong. Considered inauspicious, inappropriate to not have offerings there." So, yeah. And I think in this case, the offerings are symbols of the 5 sense objects, like the large thing in the middle is a mirror. So that symbolizes form, visual objects. And then there's symbols, little symbols that symbolizes sound, object of hearing. And then there's a conch shell, which is probably containing perfume, so that's for smell. And then some fruit for taste. And the cloth is sort of this, like a scarf, so that would be tangible objects. So those are symbols of the 5 objects of our 5 senses, beautiful and pleasing objects of the 5 senses. And then on the side there is a little lotus and the letter Tam. So that's the Tibetan letter of her seed syllable. So that's what we are supposed to visualize at our heart. But you don't have to visualize it in Tibetan. You can imagine TAM or whatever, alphabet you're familiar with, Chinese or Russian or whatever. So I like this painting because it's very clear. This artist, Fred, he's from Holland. He does digital tanka, so he paints these on a computer. Amazing. So you go to I gave you his website there. You can find other tankas. Some he has Tara with the 21 Taras around, but I thought it'd be nice just to have Tara so you can see very clearly what she looks like.